Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host. It's great to have you with us here on the program. We're going to have a very interesting conversation today. We're going to work our way through, I will say it's one of my favorite puzzles. Unfortunately, for a lot of folks, it's not that much fun. That's right. We're going to talk about an interesting concept and a book that's written by our author, our guest, who is the author, Dr. Donna Marks, and she is going to talk to us about exiting or exit the maze, one addiction, one cause, one solution. And I want to thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us here on the program.
And I'm honored to be on your show. Thank you.
It's one of those first questions, of course. What is, for our listeners, what is the one addiction?
Well, I call it one addiction because what happens is that there's this invisible hole, this sense of something is missing in my life, this void. And so that hole is always searching for a fix. So what happens with people often recognize they have an addiction or they have a bad habit, they call it, and they'll stop it. You know, they'll either stop it on their own, which is rare to be able to do that, but some people can, or they'll go to get help and stop it. And then it just switches to another addiction. For example, someone who quits smoking, who starts eating a lot of sugar, or someone who stops eating a lot of sugar and goes to carbs, or someone who gets off cocaine and starts gambling. It's just a merry-go-round, and you just jump from one seat to the next.
And of course, hence the title, Exit the Maze, because that's really what you're talking about here, jumping from one to another. You just turn the corner and, oh, I'm not out yet, and I'm not out yet, and I'm not out.
What happens is, you know, you go get help, and then you wind up from one corridor to the next. Yeah. And they're all dead end streets, and you're still in the addiction. You're not out.
I find it interesting too when I think about the puzzle, the maze. I can actually work my way through it just with my eyes. I'll just, start tracking the maze and finding, and I can usually do it in one or two tries before I ever put pen or pencil to paper. Doesn't work quite that way when we're trying to get out of that particular maze or exit the maze of addiction. And, we like you say, we trade one for the other.
That's a great metaphor that you just used, because what you're doing is you're becoming the observer of the maze rather than being in the maze and trying to get out. And if people would decide that I'm in charge of me, nobody else is in charge of me, I'm in charge of me, and I'm going to be the observer of what's going on with me and to me. And most people get addicted because something has happened to them. And they, and most people innocently become addicted. Things are made to get us addicted. They're not made to get us casual use. And almost all the things that get people addicted, if they could step back and say, let me think about this for a minute. How much alcohol content's in here? How much sugar is in here? What happens to people who gamble all the time? What's really going on here? How come I want to be on this porn site 5 times a day? If they could just step back out of that before they get addicted and say, I don't know if I want to go down that corridor, because I've watched a lot of people go down that corridor and they get stuck there. So I'm not so sure I even want to go there.
Well, and I have to tell you that it seems to me that this whole aspect of addiction, we need to define that as well, because there are those who would say, well, then if I were to use a certain criterion or a definition, if you will, that means that I have an addiction, and I never looked at it that way. I never thought of it. I mean, for example, I have a beer occasionally. I might buy, for example, I'll buy a 30-pack of cans, put it in the refrigerator, and it might last me 2-3 months or more, because I'm also drinking these 0 sugar, 0 carbs, sparkling flavored waters, which I switched from sodas. And of course, someone said to me the other day, they said, well, Richard, it's one of those things where you're looking at these addictions and you wonder sometimes, you really do. But they said to me, Uh, but Richard, it's in a plastic bottle, and that nitrogen in there, that's not good for you. And I just hold it. Wait a minute, one step at a time. I just quit drinking sodas. For 2 years, I have not had one soda. Okay, so I don't know that I necessarily switched from one addiction to the other per se. I was doing it for my health, and maybe there's the next step that'll come along in the next 6 months or something. What about that? How do you define addiction?
Well, I think the big key here is, do bad things happen? Is something bad happening? And if you continue to do something when something bad is happening, what they call negative consequences, then why would you be doing that if you weren't addicted? Addicted has become like the dirtiest word on the planet. And it's
Mhm.
really, it's become so adverse. So people have become so averse to the word because they conjure an image in their mind of someone staggering down the street, or someone on the sidewalk with a needle in their hand. That's what we think is addicted. But addicted is just simply doing the same thing, even though it's harming you. Because why else would you do it? If you get drunk and every time you have one drink, you wind up getting drunk, or even 5 out of 20 times that happens, and there's something bad follows, like a hangover or a fight or a DUI, why are you doing it again? Only because your mind, that hole is driving you. You're going for the effect. So the sodas gave you some kind of an effect. Probably the sugar gave you that little buzz, but the negative consequences to your health, you stopped. So you're not addicted anymore. Now, if you start it again, you probably will get addicted again, because it's, like I said, it's made to get you addicted. It's not made to give you controlled usage.
Right. No, I get you. Now, the main reason I did it was for me to get off of sodas, but it was also because in July of 2020, 3 months after, or 4 months or whatever, after we were all locked down, everybody switched to comfort foods, and so did we. And my blood sugar was to a level where I was told, you have type 2 diabetes. And my doctor says, it's going to be a long road, Richard. And I said, no, it's not, because I know how I got here. And in a month and a half, I had dropped it back down to normal, because I did not have another soda after the 23rd of July 2020. And, here I am today. So it's one of those, from my perspective, it's one of those things where, excuse me, you're right. You're looking for the effect. I used to drink them all the time. I even built my own cup holder on the handlebars of my bicycle, because that's how I got around, so that I could stop by the convenience store and fill that sucker up and then go bicycling. And I've never been a heavy person, never in my entire life, even during that period of time, because I think that I was burning off all of that excess sugar and carbs and everything by the bicycling. So it's kind of maintaining
Yes,
a status quo of sorts.
right.
When we talk about this process of breaking the cycle, or better yet, exiting the maze, and again, the title of the book, folks, is Exit the Maze, so we want to keep that straight. Where in the world do we start?
Well, we have to face the reality. And you said that you had to stop drinking sodas because of health reasons. And the health reasons related to addiction killed way more people than COVID. The people who died of COVID had addiction related health issues. And this just really grind away at myself, my self peace during COVID, watching everybody be terrified of getting COVID rather than being terrified of becoming addicted, because it was the heart disease, the liver disease, the diabetes illnesses, almost all major health issues have, and mental health issues, by the way, have addiction at their core. Alcohol, drugs, including nicotine, sugar, and trans fats are at the root of almost all major medical illnesses, even genetically predisposed, because if those people didn't have a lot of stress and they had a healthy diet, that they would have a much greater chance of never having these predispositioned illnesses. So it's really important to really start there, that if we were taking care of ourselves and not succumbing to these addictions, then even if we get a major pandemic, we're not going to be so worried about it. We're not going to be afraid of it because we're healthy.
You know, that's interesting that you put it that way because there was a study that was done probably, I want to say maybe less than a year into the pandemic. And it was done in New York State. And the study was done on the reason why individuals died who were now resting, so to speak, in the refrigerated trailers. And what they found, and this is to your point, was that of those of the 100% who had been classified as succumbing to the virus, 99% of them actually succumbed to the underlying conditions that the virus took advantage of. And if they had not had the heart disease, the diabetes, the high blood pressure, whatever the other conditions,
Lyme disease.
right, then they probably would have gotten really sick, but they would have survived.
Yes.
And
if they got proper treatment in the hospital, which is a whole nother topic.
Which is a whole nother topic. That is true. From your perspective, and again, yes, we're talking certainly about the virus, but we're also talking about exiting the maze, and in your case,
well, the virus tightened up the maze. What was open? What was open? Bars and grocery stores for seniors first thing in the morning, so they could all group together and spread it. You know, they weren't passing out gloves; they're passing out masks. So everything you touch, you know, is still contaminating, and then you're getting the highest risk population congregated together in the morning. And then the other people that you can go get liquor and you can get anything you want in that respect, you know, which certainly doesn't improve your chances of surviving COVID.
Indeed. We're talking
and it increases your chances of being more likely to be addicted. And also all the recovery meetings were shut down. To me, that was a travesty.
Indeed. And of course, I look at it from the standpoint that this was all new to all of us. Yeah, we could look back to the Spanish flu of the 1918, but we didn't have anybody alive that could really guide us through what they went through so that, you know, we didn't make the same mistakes. This was, for these generations that are alive today, this was brand new. This was uncharted territory in a lot of areas from my observation. And it's just really interesting how we did handle it. And I'll share that with you in a moment as we remind our listeners that you are listening to a conversation that I'm having with Dr. Donna Marks. We're talking about her book, which is called Exit the Maze, One Addiction, One Cause, One Solution. And we're going to see if we can't touch upon that one solution as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I thank you so much for being with us, folks. This is, I think, a conversation that we need to have because would there be the label addiction put on mental as well as, say, psychological addictions? I'm thinking more in terms of personal philosophies that almost seem to, I don't want to say, put us in a cult-like frame of mind, but with the polarization that we have in this country today, it kind of feels like we've got two cults that are kind of working to destroy each other because they see the other side as wrong. You could even look at the category of maybe religion, for that matter, or not just politics, but religion or the economy. And people take on these mindsets that they refuse to consider other possibilities because they've been locked into this, however they got locked into it. Is that considered an addiction too?
Well, I certainly think that people that are involved in certain sects, let's say, whether it's politics or religion, can become addicted for sure, because if they don't have enough love in their life and enough sources of pleasure and enjoyment, and they're lonely, they're susceptible to getting involved in these causes. and they can, they can lose themselves. What we want to look for, though, is their negative consequences. Now, when you're talking about a conversation and people won't have conversation, so they won't listen to the other point of view, I don't know if that's addicted or just plain stupid. I mean, how are we ever going to learn? I have my views and my beliefs, but I love listening to somebody else. When I'm watching the news, I watch all of the channels because I'm gathering information from all those sources. I'm staying above the maze and watching, I'm not in it. So I think that's a different conversation, but definitely people do get addicted to cults, to different causes. And those causes don't always have their best interests at heart. Sometimes it's more about business than it is about, the cause. So we need to be careful that we, don't get pulled into situations that don't have our best interests at heart, or that are harming us or our families in some ways. And, certainly we know that this political dialogue, where families aren't talking to each other, what is that about? I mean, that is just utterly on a mental health thing, where people can't have, families especially can't put love first and have a nice, lively, let's say, or even passionate conversation without breaking up.
Yeah.
Something's really going on in the mental health.
Yeah. Well, I had a very heated conversation with one of my siblings when I was when I was back in Phoenix for my sister's memorial, and I mean, we were probably talking for maybe 2 hours until my mother came out of the bedroom. We were staying with her at the time. My mother came out of the bedroom and said, "Boys, it's 1 a.m." And of course, the memorial was that afternoon, that same day. But we had our conversation, and I don't know whether he was listening or hearing what I was saying or not, but I was doing my utmost to hear him and listen to him and what he had to say. And we actually came to the end of the conversation agreeing on 3 particular issues that we both agreed needed to be dealt with. Even though we may not have agreed on the solutions that each of us had came to, we had agreement on, this is an issue that needs to be dealt with. And I was not about to turn that conversation into a wedge to divide us. It's always going to be my brother.
Beautiful. You chose love over being right.
I said, none of this is going to be, I mean, in 10 years, everything that we're dealing with right now is going to be 10 years old, and it's going to be in the past. And yet, and hopefully that my brother and I are still alive, we'll still be brothers. And we'll still be part of a family. And I thought that was a heck of a lot more important than our ideologies and our positions. So it's just
and if you think about it, what do we know? What do we really know? We only know what we're being told. So what are we being told, and what do we really know? Unless we're right there firsthand witnessing it.
Exactly right. We are talking with Dr. Donna Marks. She's got one book in particular that we're talking about, of course, Exit the Maze. Every time I read that title, I keep thinking, well, let's just call it Megxit. Like they did with Britain exiting Europe, called it Brexit. So this is Megxit, but we won't go there. Exit the Maze is the title of the book. And we are talking with, again, as I said, Dr. Donna Marks here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host. And it is really a pleasure to have an opportunity to talk about these particular issues, specifically when it comes to our mental health, our mental and our spiritual well-being, because my understanding, Doctor, is that the next pandemic, though it probably won't be labeled as such, but it certainly can be observed as such, is our mental health crisis because of the virus that we've been dealing with and the lockdown and all of the subsequent things that happened over the last 2+ years. Is that a fair assessment from your perspective?
I think our mental health crisis is because of addiction.
Just because of it? Okay. I think COVID actually, as you say, brought that out.
Yes, I think that, when we look at how many people are suffering from anxiety, which I don't use that word in my practice when I'm dealing with patients, we use the word fear. because that's what it is. And you don't need to give pills to fear. You need to give solutions to fear. And a pill is a Band-Aid, not a solution. So, and then depression, the conditions now of how people are expected to function when they at an early age are giving electronic devices and are isolated and do not develop interpersonal skills based on good self-esteem and social interaction with other children and proper supervision and interaction and affirmations and integrations and time with family to learn how to cope with the world has created kids who have that hole, that invisible hole, which I call the one addiction, far worse than children who are raised with enough food, shelter, warmth, love, attention, affirmations. Almost all parents who are abusive have addictions, and that's why they're abusive. We know that the domestic violence rate is almost always tied into addiction, including the addictive relationship and the domestic assault relationships, where that's an addiction of going back and forth to the same trauma, despite negative consequences, without mutual intervention and healing. So what's happened is that the children are put out into the classroom or not, but in either case, they don't have the sense of I'm valuable and so are you, and let's spend time together and let's make each other feel good in healthy ways. And so there's this, growing internal void, number one. And then on the other hand, some parents are going to the other extreme of I've got to be the perfect parent and meet every need on demand. And that child is going into the world expecting the world to bow down to their requests. They were playing something on Facebook recently. A woman was like demanding and this is what's happening politically too, that one person or a few people will demand that the world bows down to their belief system or their feelings of what they think should happen. And this is not good mental health. So all this is priming people to get out of that bad feeling that they're in and engage in some type of addiction.
Yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic in which we live, but this isn't anything new, is it? Or is this new from the standpoint of our technology, the industrial revolution that took place? What was it, in the late 1800s, early 1900s? Do we have an idea as to when this started, or is it tied to our modern technology of, say, the last 20, 30, maybe 40 years?
Well, I think that, before we had so many addictive things that it certainly was better. Although we do know that there was a different type of problem, in the 1800s, 1700s, or early 1900s, even of surviving, so there was a different dynamic that could have caused parenting to be less effective because there was such a strong work ethic and surviving was more important. So there was a much more hardcore attitude, and rigidity, and religion was involved in that also, which, it had a negative effect on child development for sure. But that's different than what we're going through now, where parents might have much better techniques and styles and information. There's so many books available on how to have effective parenting. But if you can read 10 books, and if you're getting drunk every night, or you're on your porn site all the time, or you're working 20 hours a day, and you're not involved with your children, those parent effectiveness skills don't really go very far.
I know that it's very easy to focus on our screens, as the term is now, which applies to pretty much anything that puts you on the internet. Okay. And I've sort of made the commitment myself that even if I have work that I need to do at home on the computer, I try to stretch it out in such a way so that at least one night I just put the computer aside and I go in the house and I spend the whole evening with my wife, dinner and watching television or whatever it is that we're doing. I know that's another screen, but it's different. Okay. And then there will be those nights where I'll say, okay, I do have a little computer work that I need to take care of, and I'm going to take care of it early so that I can get back in here and, we can, again, spend the rest of that evening and so forth. And she understands that for the most part. I think she does. And so I'm trying to balance all those particular dynamics. And I know it's kind of hard for people to do. And then it becomes an addiction. I mean, maybe at first it wasn't, but it becomes one, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And I'm glad you brought up the whole technology issue because it's a new babysitter, a phone
Yeah.
or an app or an iPad. It's the new babysitter. And they're very addictive, especially for kids, because they're getting this constant stimulation and they don't want to put them down. Even parents who try to put limits on children using them, the children will act like any other addiction and they'll start sneaking, hiding it under their pillow and having temper tantrums when they can't do it, So, and then they get diagnosed as being on the spectrum when really they probably are, but not for the reasons that they should, that they're, that there's some kind of neurodefection that
Right.
they're born with. It's because of, they've been programmed to want that immediate gratification right now, and any type of other social type of skill of just being and playing and coloring and things that are tapping into the other part of the brain, which is the creativity and balance and being in that Zen type of feeling for a child, or even playtime with other kids, which is very exciting and stimulating in a normal situation.
Mm-hmm.
These things are put aside for those technologies. And then the kids on the spectrum, so they go to the doctor because they're bored in school, they're not learning. And this isn't the only cause of ADDH, by the way. Emotionally disturbed children are often undiagnosed and misdiagnosed as having attention deficit disorder. But anyhow, in either case, whether they're evaluated by their teachers as on the spectrum or that they are just not interested and can't focus and are hyper or whatever, they're taken to the doctor, and rather than looking at the cause and dealing with the cause, these little kids are being put on pills.
If I had been born 10 years later, I was born in 1960. If I had been born in 1970 and exhibited the same levels of energy and enthusiasm and excitement that I did when I was a kid in the 60s and early 70s into my teen years, I probably would have been diagnosed with those acronyms or spectrum titles. And so I then have to ask you, in your area of expertise, if these are real conditions or if they've just the attributes of a child being a child are being diagnosed as something so that we can start them on the road to pilldom. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I mean,
Well, I think that we've unconsciously entered the pharmaceutical maze, which is a horrible maze, and you hear it all the time, the overdoses, the addictions, and all of that. But again, we have to step back and look at what's going on here. And do we want to be a part of it, or do we want to just evaluate all the information and make conscious decisions that we know are right for us? These situations, are you going to say, is obesity real? Of course, if someone's 100 pounds overweight, they have an obesity problem. Okay, is, going in and doing the abdominal resection the solution? Well, it's a solution, but it doesn't really deal with the cause of the problem. So that person, this is very common that they don't tell you when they're getting ready to do the surgery. Those people who have those eating disorders that were never treated, they get the surgery to lose weight. They do lose weight, but then a very high chance that they become alcoholic. So again, that one addiction just jumps around from into the next well of to the next corridor. So we really need to deal with the causes of these things, and not just, I mean, you can keep cutting out a person's lung until there's nothing left because they're smoking. You can put them on pills for that too, but you're giving up a piece of your brain every time you do that. Every time you take a pill to deal as a solution for a mental health problem, and addiction is a mental health problem, you're giving up a piece of your mind and your brain. Is that really what you want to do, or you want to get rid of the problem altogether?
Yeah. It's a very interesting dynamic, to say the very least, that we are dealing with specifically in this country. Is it a global problem?
Oh, definitely, definitely. You can, in my, where the book that Exit the Maze, One Addiction, One Cause, originally was One Cure, now it's One Solution. The revised edition that's coming out in December, I have all the statistics from the World Health Organization and National Institute on Health, and tons and tons and tons of statistics on world health conditions that are, and then when you have to kind of dig a little. The number one killer on the planet is heart disease. What causes heart disease? Again, it's back to, alcohol, drugs, sugar, trans fats, that those are the main components of people who wind up having heart attacks. And then rather than, they'll say, well, stop smoking or stop eating this. But how? Once you become addicted, the doctor tells you to stop it. So now they give you a pill. This will block the cholesterol, this will do this will do that, or they operate, or whatever the case may be, rather than you need some help with your addiction. Why don't we do that?
Yeah, that's a good question. It
No,
seems like
because the pill is the solution.
yeah, exactly, exactly. I mean, it just it's like the answers are like sitting right there in front of us. They seem like it's so simple, and yet we refuse to. There seems to be two aspects to this. We not only in this country in particular, and I kind of have noticed this, that in this country we don't want any interference from anybody from the outside telling us how to solve our problems. We are Americans in the greatest country in the world, and we will solve our own problems. We don't need your help, whatever country it might be, whatever other individual. It's like, seriously, we can't learn from other people? I mean, that's kind of why we're here, to learn from each other, And there's always the skepticism and the cynicism and so forth, that the ideas came from somewhere else. It's like there is no vacuum. Every idea came from previous ideas before. There's nothing new under the sun, as it says. And I just find that's it's really unfortunate that we have, as a nation, quite honestly, we've taken that perspective that we know what's best for us.
Well, it's not just America. There's people
That's true.
on the planet that think they know what's best for everybody. And but here's the beautiful thing. And to go back to your metaphor, we as individuals can step back from all that and look at it and observe it and check with our own inner knowing and our own inner self, our own spirit, and decide what's best for us. We don't have to succumb to any type of group think or elite think, or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
We can think for ourselves. We can think for ourselves. And we all have that part of us that knows right from wrong, and we can know what's right from wrong for ourselves too.
Well, I'll tell you, it's really kind of cool to have you here on the program to talk about this, because I think it's an important aspect of where we are, and quite honestly, and maybe one aspect where we're going. And if we don't get a handle on some of these things, we're not going very far. Everybody's so concerned about this nation continuing on, into the 300th or 400th year. Well, take a look at history, because we apparently as human beings seem to refuse to learn from history and not make the same mistakes that were made, so as to preserve, if this is the lifestyle that you want, this is the kind of system you want to live under, to preserve it. We're not learning the lessons from past civilizations on how to take care of ourselves and each other. How important, if I may ask this question, as a matter of fact, I'm going to hold off on asking this question for just a moment, because I want to remind you folks that you are listening to Tell Me Your Story. We're talking with Dr. Donna Marks, and Exit the Maze is the title of her book. She's got another book we want to talk about here in just a couple minutes as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I wanted to ask you, Doctor, if I can pull the question.
You just call me Donna, by the way.
All right, Donna. All right, that's so much better.
Thank you.
This aspect of learning how to learn from history. The interesting question that was posed to me when I used that phrase in a recent interview was, okay, that's great. What are we supposed to learn from history? What? You know, and I thought, well, that's a legitimate question because no one's ever really asked it before. All they say is, learn from history. Well, what am I supposed to learn? It's kind of like in school. You go to English class. What am I supposed to learn here? Chemistry? I don't think so. I'm supposed to learn English. What are your thoughts in terms of this process that we nationally as well as globally are going through in terms of either your optimism or your pessimism as an individual as well as a therapist in terms of the, I don't know, the extenuation, the longevity of America as well as the majority of the 8 billion people that are on the planet to continue?
Well, I think that the key to what we can learn from history, and I assume you're talking about the self-destructive components of history,
Yes.
is that, we always have the choice between fear or love. As you know, I'm a student of A Course in Miracles, and it's not for everybody because it's dense reading, but I like it because it makes me think, and I like to think.
Yeah.
But there's always that choice. And if I'm imposing, we can take a recent situation in this country of people trying to impose their political views on each other. I'm right, you're wrong. And that leads to anger, and that leads to war. We take Russia and Ukraine. One country is invading and imposing on the other, and it leads to war. If we can do exactly what you did with your brother, and even though we might feel activated and feel uncomfortable, that we choose love over fear, then we can stay engaged and stay on track for solutions that are win-win and not win-lose or lose-lose. Because actually, there's no such thing as a win-lose. If I get everything I want and you get nothing that you want, I'm losing too. Because the world goes on relationships working, not failing. So if a person gains everything and has nothing, as they say in the good book, what do they have? A whole lot of nothing. Because you can have everything material, but if you don't have love and you don't know how to share and receive love, and you don't have friends and you don't have a cause and you don't have anybody to care about, and you're not fulfilling a purpose, you have nothing. You have nothing. So you'll keep looking and accumulating and getting more and more and more. And that's an addiction too, going nowhere and more negative consequences. So if we learn anything from history, it's not to impose on one another, but to be love, to share love, and to receive love, and solve our problems from that perspective. As corny as it might sound, it is the only thing that works.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree with you more on that. And one of the focal points of this program is, of course, to take a look at those new ways of living. All you have to do is take a look around. The old ways, they don't work anymore. They just don't. How far do you have to go back? You don't have to go back that far. A couple of years maybe, or 5 years or 10 years, and realize that we're not making the kinds of differences in the lives of the people around us. I've even posed this question, and I've been, taken to task sometimes for asking the question, does humanity even deserve to be allowed to continue because of the way it treats its fellow man? Man's inhumanity to man, as they say. And I'm still an optimistic person. My glass is still half full. And I tend to believe that, that's the reason we go to school, for example, education. We're there to learn. We're there to evolve intellectually, mentally, and so forth, as well as socially. Then we, we're only in school for 12 years. Well, maybe it's going to take 12,000 years for us as a species to finally get the message that, we don't have to play these silly games that, they're playing over there in the eastern part of Europe, in Ukraine. As I've often said, this is not the way we play in the 21st century, you knucklehead. Grab that little guy by the ear and say, you're on a permanent timeout, kind of thing. That's kind of what I heard when I first heard about the invasion. I'm going, we don't play this way. It's not the way I was taught anyway. um, what about?
Yes, and we don't know what's really, like I said, we don't know everything. We're not
No, that's
there.
true.
We're not on either side in the inner circles of how this all came about. But we do, but I do know this, that there could have been an interception, an intervention. There are powers like we have here in this country and other powers in the world that could have done an intervention. That's what the United Nations used to do. I don't know what they do now. And had these people work this out from the place of caring and loving, not killing.
Yes, yes.
Which
No,
is just in this day and age is just unbelievable. But we sit back and watch it, and then we help them kill each other.
yeah. Which I still remember when I was a kid growing up, and there was the Egyptian-Israeli war, I guess it was, and this was the logic that I had heard. We were supplying weapons to both sides because we didn't want Russia to be supplying weapons. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me?
Yeah, if it's true, again,
if it's true, that goes back to that other aspect of knowing what.
I think we can all relate to the fact that someone came into our home and started, trying to take it over, we would defend it, of course.
Sure.
But, there should be some type of intervention that I can call 911 and they'll help.
Yeah.
The president of is calling 911
and nobody
getting
answers.
help, but it's not helping stop the problem.
That's it right there. Yeah. Self-care in terms of making sure that we are taking care of ourselves in such a way that we can be sure that, hey, I'm going to be all right. I'm going to make it. I know I'm going to make it. It's going to be okay. What are some of the methods you've come up with? Because you say that your solution is different than others. So let's take a look at that aspect of self-care and say, okay, so how do we make sure that we're going to make it, that we're going to be okay?
Well, some people don't feel that way. I know when I was addicted, I didn't feel like I was going to be okay. And so that's why I needed my addiction to make me feel okay. But the problem is the more you engage in an addiction to feel okay, the more okay you're not going to be.
Okay.
So
I'm so confused.
So here's the thing. I believe, and I think that's what's missing in treatment facilities. I believe that every addiction is a substitute for love. So what do I mean by that? Well, when I drink a drink, or when I smoke a cigarette, or when I was running marathons, I was getting high. It made me feel that feeling I was looking for. Because when I wasn't doing those things, I had this dis-ease, they call it, unease, and I just didn't feel comfortable in my own skin, or there's got to be something that'll make me feel better, more therapy, more spiritual retreats, more this, more that, on and on and on. It just never ended. And then finally, I had to realize, and the Course in Miracles helped me with this part, is that what I'm looking for isn't out there, it's in here. It's in here, and it's having that conscious contact with that inner voice that will guide me into the right directions. And also, most importantly, I had to learn how to love myself. And this gets us back to the earlier part of the conversation and how we are raised. And I'm not blaming parents. I'm a parent. I have 3 children. I made all the mistakes. It was in my template from my own parenting. But we can do better. We can do better. And to learn how to raise children that are so full of a good self-esteem and good feelings that they can bounce off with the negativities that happen in life, and it doesn't penetrate them. But when like myself, have this pain inside from having a defective environment, and we go into the world, we never fit, and we're always trying to fit. So those things help us to feel like we fit. Once I had to learn how to do the kind of parenting of myself that I didn't get back then, which means a full spectrum from proper nutrition, getting the right kind of affection and giving the right kind of affection to people, staying safe, providing for myself, taking care of my emotional needs, healing my wounds from the past. These are all acts of love. These happen naturally in a healthy childhood environment. But for most people, by the way, it doesn't happen. So when we have those wounds, we have to address them, we have to heal them, and then we have to learn how to love ourselves. I have a thing on my website called 101 plus ways to self-love. From the time you wake up in the morning till the time you go to sleep at night. We think that love is a feeling. I love candy. I love M&Ms. I love, vodka tonic. I love pot. I love this. I love that. But really what we love is that feeling we get. It's not love at all. In fact, it's self-hatred because we are destroying ourselves with those things. Once we learn that love is an action word, it's an action word. I take the time to take care of myself and my relationships. I share, that's a part of self-love, because when I'm sharing, I'm feeling good inside. And so this is the way out of the maze, and we won't want to go back in it because we'll forget about it. I don't even think about any addictions anymore. I don't think about it at all. My life is so full of so much joy and peace and happiness and fulfilling my mission, which is to save millions of lives from addiction, that I don't even think about it anymore. It's just, I wake up happy, I go to sleep happy. Yes, lots of challenging things happen and it's uncomfortable, but it's not anything that isn't contributing to my own spiritual and emotional development.
Well, we are grateful for the work that you are doing as you share with us here on the program. Dr. Donna Marks and Exit the Maze, and this is Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and it's really a pleasure to have Donna with us here on the program. Dr. Donna Marks, and you have another work that I want to talk about. Because it's one of the areas, of course, that I always find so fascinating, having to do with our spiritual lives. And this is very interesting that the process for becoming a whole human being, it certainly can be very, very trying. But you talk about in one of your other books, in your other book called Learn, Grow, Forgive. It's a path to spiritual success. What is, from your perspective, what is spiritual success?
Well, I don't believe that we have to grow into anything. I think we're born. We're born in perfection. I'm not discounting people who have birth defects. I mean, that's a fact.
Mm-hmm.
But even so, people with birth defects can fulfill a happy and beautiful life full of love. So we are born with that inner perfection, regardless. But what happens is it's not cultivated. Okay, so that beautiful baby's born with or without defects, and that inner self-esteem is either cultivated or damaged. And so what we must learn how to do is understand how important that is to give that baby have its needs be met. And there's so many psychology books written about it, but just the basic needs of feeling loved and cared for. Let's just put it in its simplest term, and of value, and to be treated with love, and including discipline is an important part of having a good self-esteem, because if we're not taught it early on, where are we going to get it? And so, but it's done in a firm way, but in a loving way, in an educational way, where there's consequences, logical consequences, but they're not punitive in the sense of physical punishment or over abuse of a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't tell people they're sinners, evil sinners. They are human beings who make stupid mistakes, and all they need to do is correct them. It's just part of being human. It's just normal, but we correct them, because when I'm an evil sinner, I have so much shame, it's hard for me to admit my mistakes. But if I'm being told it's just normal, it's okay, let's talk about this, let's learn from this, let's grow from this. Mm-hmm. And so I noticed when people are in patterns, the reason I wrote that book, I had a lot of patterns myself, and I was so ashamed of them, and it kept me trapped in them. So once I realized rather than just judging myself and feeling worse and worse, what am I learning from this? And how can I use these same patterns to grow spiritually? And then I naturally lost the patterns. They left me like addiction does, because when I am forgiving myself and I'm growing from situations, I don't need to keep doing them anymore. They just leave me, just like an old pair of shoes that doesn't fit anymore.
There you go. There, absolutely. That's a great way to put it. I've often thought of it in terms of if it isn't serving me, I'm not going to hang on to it. If I'm not using it, if you will, using that analogy, then I'm going to maybe give them to someone else and move on to something newer and nicer and something that I like today. So that's
And it just organically happens. You don't have to make it happen.
yeah, exactly. One of the things, though, that I came to, because I was challenged on this based upon what you just said, I was challenged on this by someone who turned to me in a conversation. They said, well, what about all of the mistakes that you have made? To which I responded, I have never made a mistake in my life. Never. What I have had are life lessons and or learning experiences, as you, Donna, just described, that those mistakes, if you want to call them, are just that. That's why we're here, to learn. And so to label them as sins, that's why I'm not buying into the whole original sin thing, because according to the Old Testament, the sins of the father are passed on to the sins of the son down 7 generations. Adam was a heck of a lot more than 7 generations ago. So original sin is not mine, because basically what you're telling me is that from the moment I was born, I had a death sentence on my head. And that doesn't make any sense. That you enter a world, or you go into, let's just say you're traveling across country and you enter one state, and if one hair is out of place, you're penalized in some way, shape, or form. That doesn't make any sense. So I kind of set that particular belief aside. What about this aspect of, some have called it schoolhouse earth? Are we not here to learn and to grow, as you've talked about, especially in this particular book, so as to evolve physically, mentally, emotionally, as well as spiritually, but that many of the institutions that we have, they don't want us to grow. They don't want us to evolve for whatever their nefarious
Well,
reasons might be.
a lot of doctrines are crowd control. And so, even including, governmental crowd control,
Sure.
COVID crowd control, religious crowd control, rules, whatever. So, look, where do you want to put your focus?
Mm-hmm.
Now, yes, we make mistakes. I personally think that, I like acknowledging my mistakes to the person who I've hurt or harmed, because
Mm-hmm.
it feels good to me to do that, because then I'm placing my relationship in the possibility for forgiveness, which is important. And when I acknowledge my mistakes to my husband or my children or my friends, I am giving myself permission to be human and to heal whatever wound I might have caused, and to give them the opportunity, because there's always two.
Mm-hmm.
Some people don't want us to do that, though. And some people, even if we do it, it doesn't do any good, because they are more intent on continuing the defect rather than healing it. And in those situations, there's no point in us continuing to apologize and trying to atone, because it's feeding the wolf, so to speak, rather than saying enough is enough.
Mm-hmm.
From a world perspective, countries do the same thing. They never admit they're wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
2 wrongs might make a right, like giving arms to both sides, if that happens, or none to either, whatever.
None to either, yeah.
But and I'm going to have to leave in a second, but
Sure.
again, do we want fear or love?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that is the solution. And it doesn't mean being weak. Love is strong.
Right.
Love is the only thing that's going to survive. And the only people that will survive in the end will be the ones who are committed to that. Everybody else, we won't have to worry about destroying each other. We will destroy ourselves individually.
Yeah. Yeah. Dr. Donna Marks is my guest here on the program. Donna, I want to ask you three final questions because I know you have to run, and I'm going to make those fairly quick. And I thank you again for giving us so much time. This was a fascinating conversation, and I'm hoping that maybe we can do this again sometime and continue this dialogue.
I'd love to.
All right. First of those three questions for you is, who is Donna Marks?
Well, I am somebody who has overcome a great many things and who wants to share that lifetime of experience with other people to help people find their true self, their true mission, their true purpose. And my mission in life is to save millions of people's lives from addiction and help them to return to who they really are, which I think that everyone has a beautiful soul to them. And, we've got to help them to remove those barriers to who they really are. Because if we're stuck in any kind of maze at all, we are not breaking free out of that invisible shell. And so that's who I am, is committed to that mission of helping people to find their true identity, which is love.
The next two questions then you may have already answered, but I'm going to ask them just the same. What is it that you hope to or want to achieve through the work that you are doing now?
Yes, to save millions of lives from addiction.
And finally, what is your life's purpose?
Well, it's the same thing, to be, to represent, in spite of all my flaws, in spite of all my mistakes, in spite of all the things I did wrong, and in spite of all the things that happened to me, and there's been tons of tragedy, poverty, you name it, you can go right down the list, I've been through it. But in spite of that, the spirit is manifesting. So who I am is committed to being who I am here and to fulfill my mission.
And you found your life to be worth living. You're still with us in spite of everything, or maybe even because of everything you've been through. And we thank you for being with us here on this program.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And I thank you for being with us here on Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. We hope that you will listen to and or watch the programs. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to lol.